my name is Gianna. I'm one of the reference librarians here at the Chelmsford Public Library. And thank you so much for joining us tonight for future solar eclipses. On April 8th, 2024, the moon's dark shadow will cross the continental US for the second time in 7 years. This total solar eclipse promises to be among the most widely observed in history. It's already widely anticipated, as many hotels within the path of totality sold out in 2 years in advance. And another solar eclipse, this one an annular ring eclipse, served as a warm-up act when it crossed the western US in October 2023. This presentation will provide an overview of the nature of solar eclipses, helpful advice for seeing April's event successfully, and a preview of solar eclipses worth seeing through 2028. So I'm just going to do a quick intro of our speaker tonight. We have J. Kelly Beatty, who has been explaining the science and wonder of astronomy to the public since 1974, when he joined the staff of Sky and Telescope. An award-winning writer and communicator, he specializes in planetary science and space exploration. You'll occasionally hear his interviews on the Weather Channel and NPR. During the 1980s, he was among the first Western journalists to gain firsthand access to the Soviet space program, which was super, super cool. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to J. Kelly Beatty.
Thank you very much, Gianna, and welcome everybody. Wow, what a great turnout, and it's my pleasure to be here with all of you. This is an area that is near and dear to my heart. I am what you call an eclipse chaser. I have seen 15 total solar eclipses and about 7 or 8 annular eclipses, ring eclipses, which we'll get into in a second. So I have a real love for these things, and we are going to have so much fun tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here, and we will get started. I need to share sound, and yes, we will. Then we're going to start the slideshow. Always do it this way because, okay, great. So we're going to cover all kinds of things: how eclipses happen, what's special about them, what to look for, how to view them safely, how to take pictures of them, and we'll finish up with a little bit of what's coming up in the future after this one coming up in April. But I have to say there are few things in nature. Maybe if a volcano erupted, in southern New Hampshire or something like that, it would be exciting. But there are a few things in nature, certainly celestially, more exciting, unique, and just mind-blowingly amazing than total eclipses of the sun. And as the intro said, we're about to have the second one that we've had here in the continental contiguous US in the last 7 years. And the reason it's so amazing is that what you're seeing here is a picture of a totally eclipsed sun. And I have to say, pictures do not do justice to what you can see with your eyeballs. So imagine it's an ordinary day and something happens, you look up in the sky and there's a black bullet hole where the sun used to be, and around it is this sort of electric white wreath of streamers coming out. This is the sun's atmosphere, the corona. And then all around you, it's gotten dark, kind of dark twilight dark. And the temperature drops and animals go to roost. And it's just the kind of experience that you cannot imagine before you actually experience it. So I'm going to get you ready for that. First, a little background here. The moon's orbit is inclined or tipped with respect to Earth's orbit around the sun by 5 degrees. And that doesn't seem like much, but what it means is that we don't get eclipses every month. Otherwise, at every full moon and every new moon, we'd have an eclipse, and they'd be boring and you wouldn't have me speaking tonight. But instead, that alignment of the sun and the earth and the moon can happen on opposite sides of our orbit, 6 months apart. And there has to be a new moon or a full moon at that moment in time in order to get an eclipse. So I just want to talk briefly a little bit about lunar eclipses. The Earth casts a big shadow. And so when the moon travels through it, going around its orbit, anybody who's on the night side of the Earth can see that eclipse of the moon. And, the funny thing is that if Earth didn't have an atmosphere, when these eclipses happen, the moon would just go black, but it doesn't. It takes on this really weird, eerie, coppery or slightly reddish color. You'll sometimes hear these called blood moons because of the color. And what's happening is that sunlight is kind of squeaking around the edge of the Earth, being refracted into this shadow cone, which is called the umbra. And because it's around the edge of the earth, the light is colored like sunset colors, reddish. And that gives the moon this reddish hue. There's also a kind of a partial shadow called the penumbra. But in any case, we can see these lunar eclipses wherever we are on the back side of the earth, on the dark side of the earth here. And here's an example of what our magazine, my magazine, Sky and Telescope, used to do to predict. The umbra is the dark inner part, and the penumbra is the sort of shadowy outer part of Earth's shadow. And when the moon goes through it, it turns dark. I picked this one, December of 2011, because here is a time-lapse photo of that same eclipse. And you can see very distinctly the round shape of Earth's shadow. In fact, it was this shadow during eclipses that convinced the ancient Greeks that Earth really was round and not flat. So here are some upcoming lunar eclipses. This year is going to be pretty boring. Nothing special to talk about. Starting next year, we're going to have a run of 3 total lunar eclipses in a row, 2 of which will be visible from here in North America. So that's something to look forward to. But we're not here to talk about lunar eclipses tonight. Nope. We are here to talk about solars.
Idiots.
Oh.
Hey, I heard there's a lunar eclipse tonight. Maybe we should look up.
Nah, for me it's solar or nothing.
Solar or nothing is the mantra of the night. So we get a lunar eclipse when it's a full moon, and we get a solar eclipse when it's new moon, when the moon is between us and the sun. Now the moon's a lot smaller, so it casts a smaller shadow. And you can see by this diagram, then rather than instead of covering the whole Earth, it only covers a really small spot on the daylit side. And we can actually see this from space. This is a photo taken from space of an eclipse of the sun, total eclipse, that happened in 1998. I'm sorry, 99. This is over Europe, and you can't tell it's Europe because it was cloudy that day over all of Europe. And so nobody got to see the eclipse. And this is an interesting thing about solar eclipses. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy or not. They still happen. It still gets dark. Here's another one a little bit more recently taken from a meteorological satellite. And you can see that dark spot, tracing across the surface of the Earth. And unlike a lunar eclipse, if you want to see totality, you literally have to be where that spot is passing over. You have to be in the right place at the right time. Now, there's an interesting thing about the moon. It's not in a circular orbit quite around the Earth. Its orbit sometimes brings it a little closer, sometimes farther away. And, amazingly, the sun is 400 times bigger than the Earth, but it's also, 400 times bigger than the moon, but it's also 400 times farther away. And so what that means is that in the sky, the sun and the moon have almost exactly the same apparent size. It's about the size of your pinky fingernail held up at arm's length. That's about how big it is. And so consequently, the moon is just big enough to cover the whole sun, but only when it's at the point in its orbit where it's closest to Earth. When it's a little bit farther away, and we're only talking a few percent here, remarkably, the moon is not quite big enough to cover the sun. And so we get these 2 kinds of what we call central solar eclipses. If the moon is close to us at what's called perigee, then it completely covers the sun. We get a total solar eclipse. On the other hand, if it's a little bit farther away, it can't quite cover it, even though it's going straight across, and it leaves behind a ring of sunlight, or an annulus, and we call that an annular solar eclipse. This is what one of those looks like from a couple of years ago. This took place over southern Canada, and you can see the moon is going right across the sun, but it's not quite big enough to cover it completely. Now, this process of the eclipse takes about 3 hours, more or less, from when the moon first takes a nibble out of the sun. That's its silhouette there at upper left, going to lower right. And so, in the middle is an annular eclipse like this, or if it completely covers the sun, it can be a total eclipse, like you see there with the 3 central images. And even though the entire eclipse lasts about 3 hours, totality, that point where the moon is completely covering the sun, lasts a maximum of 6.5 or 7 minutes. That's all. And so that's the excitement. That's the really exciting part. So it turns out that these eclipses of the sun can happen anywhere on the earth at any time. It's not totally random, but it's completely indifferent to where on the earth you are. And so this is a map of all of the total and annular eclipses. The annulars are a slightly more common for a 20-year period. And you can see that a couple of those cross the United States. You can see there the trace of the one that was in 2017. That's right here. And it kind of looks like a random pattern. So this is the next 20 years, beginning in 2021, running through 2040. And here's the path of the eclipse coming up. Here's the path of the one that was last October, an annular eclipse, but still it kind of looks like a random pattern. Okay, so Fred Espenak, who calls himself Mr. Eclipse, put these together for me. I had him do a slightly different version. This is 25 years of just total solar eclipses. The annulars have been removed. Now you can start to see a pattern emerging. See these two big arcs down in Antarctica? Or here's this one coming up in 2024 right here. It looks an awful lot, the shape does, to this one in 2006 that went over Africa and Asia. That 18-year period is real. 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours to be specific. That's called a Saros cycle, and it's a repeating cycle of the Earth, Moon, Sun geometry that repeats almost exactly. But because the cycle has that 8 hours in it, during that 8 hours, the Earth has turned about a third of the way. So you'll get exactly the same geometric shape of the shadow, say in 2009, this one over here. And then 18 years later, it repeats, but because of the 8 hours, it's shifted in longitude. And so as you can see, this pattern has a sort of, it repeats in thirds. So 3 Saros cycles, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours times 3 creates a repeat pattern where the same eclipse happens over the same part of the world. We call that an exoligmos. That's your word for the day, right out of Harry Potter, exoligmos. It's like some spell being cast. Okay, so statistically, every place on the Earth should see a total eclipse of the sun about once every 375 years. And I said, okay, well, let's see how that plays out for the US. I asked a friend of mine who's a cartographer named Michael Zeiler to create a map for me of all total solar eclipses crossing the contiguous US from the years 1775 to 2150. That's 375 years. And you can see that there are a lot of places in the US that do not see a total eclipse. West Texas, southern New Mexico, a lot of the West doesn't see it. So I said, So, okay, I went back to Fred Espenak. I said, Fred, give me 1,000 years of total solar eclipses over the US. And this is what he came up with. And you notice there are still places in Texas and southern New Mexico that don't see totality. We'll get our share here in New England for sure, but it's just the statistical nature of this. So because it can happen anywhere, I wanted to show you a couple of eclipses that have happened recently and give you a little feel for them. I'm going to show you a couple of annulars and a total eclipse. In 2021, there was an annular eclipse that started off in southern Canada, went over Greenland, went over the North Pole, and ended up in Siberia. And you can see the globe there. The gray band is the area that you would have to be in order to see the complete annuals. Now, let me explain those other lines there. The blue lines are 20% lines of partial eclipse. So at 80%, you see 80% eclipse and so forth. The red lines are times because the eclipse happens because the moon's shadow is traveling across the Earth. And so it doesn't happen instantaneously. Those red lines are half an hour apart. And so this is what that path looked like. Boy, it was so close to the US, but not quite. And so a lot of people there are a lot of people like me who chase eclipses. We all wanted to go see this, but this was during the height of the pandemic. And so, it was very complicated. Not only that, but the weather prospects weren't really very good. This is angled a little differently. Here's Alaska down here at the bottom. Here's the beginning there. Here's the Great Lakes down here in the lower right corner. And I'm going to show you a bunch of these maps. Red is bad. That means it's going to be cloudy or likely to be very cloudy. And so here we have this eclipse that was taking in place in Canada, in a remote stretch of Canada, with the weather prospects really bad. And oh yeah, that was during the pandemic. You might remember Canada closed its borders. So nobody could go see this eclipse. But I was undaunted. One of the things I still do for Sky and Telescope is create tours for interesting astronomical events. And so I chartered a jet. I chartered an A319 from Delta, and we left from the Minneapolis airport, which is down there in the lower left corner. We crossed the border north of into Canada, north of Lake Superior, and we set up a path to intercept this eclipse of the sun in midair. And it was very exciting. It was so exciting that I managed to get a friend of mine, Rob Marciano from ABC News, to come along with us. And here's his story.
We turn now to the cosmic event that just a few northern stretches of the U.S. got to see early this morning, an annular eclipse as the moon crosses the sun. Our Rob Marciano was one of the lucky few who got a front row seat to see this natural phenomenon.
Just after sunrise this morning, the moon, at its farthest point from the Earth, passed in front of the sun for an annular eclipse and creating what's called a ring of fire, looking more like devil horns here off the coast of New Jersey. Up on Randall's Island in New York City, eager spectators woke up extra early to catch a glimpse.
My mom works for NASA, so I've always been interested in astronomy, so I had to come see this.
But what those areas saw was just a partial eclipse. The annular eclipse's path traveling through Ontario, across Greenland, and over the North Pole and Siberia. Here we go. So to get the full Ring of Fire experience, we flew on a special Sky and Telescope charter flight dubbed Eclipse Air. For Sarah Zizi, she couldn't have asked for a better birthday present.
This is my fourth eclipse.
Your fourth eclipse?
Yes.
Ever seen an eclipse from an airplane?
No, this is my first, and my first annular.
What a treat.
I'm so excited.
Welcome aboard Flight 8875. It is our pleasure to have you with us for this morning for this viewing of the annular eclipse.
You guys ready to take off into an eclipse?
Yeah.
We took off from Minneapolis with more than 30 die-hard eclipse chasers, getting a window seat to this cosmic event.
It's about 80% covered right now.
At 39,000 feet, the plane is flying above 3/4 of the atmosphere, making the eclipse appear even brighter. And from this view, passengers got another minute of annularity due to the speed of the aircraft. For them, it's a celestial dream come true.
I felt my heart was so open. I cried, and I could see the moon in front of the sun, and it was literally something happened for me.
It's spiritual, isn't it?
Yeah, it was spiritual.
As for the next one,
All right, when's the next one? Where are we going next?
Next one is December 4th of this year. It's a total solar eclipse. We will have a flight. And this is off the coast of the tip of South America, because the only way you'll be able to see it is from Antarctica.
The chase rolls on.
It does. Well, there you go, my 5 seconds of fame. You notice that there weren't very many people on that flight. That's because you can only watch out of one side of the, you can only watch out of one side of the plane, and I didn't allow more than 2 people per row. So this past April, there was what we call a hybrid solar eclipse off the coast of Australia and crossing Indonesia. You know, it's a hybrid because look how skinny that path is. And it turns out that at either end of that path, it's an annular eclipse, and in the middle, it's total. That's why it's called a hybrid. And here's what's going on. At the beginning and end of the track, the shadow of the moon has to stretch a little bit farther to actually reach the Earth. Whereas in the middle, it's a little bit shorter by the radius of the Earth. And so there it's total. And then at either end, it's annular. So that's why we call it a hybrid. We saw it out from the deck of a ship. It was fantastic. It was a great event. So these are the upcoming solar eclipses. And I included that annular from last October. And you can see that they're all over the place. But I want you to notice that the one coming up this coming April, on April 8th, is fairly long in duration for a total eclipse. In fact, it's one of the 8 longest total solar eclipses in this century. So definitely worth looking for. It's also the case that the totality that's coming up, there's a place in Texas, in the hill country of Texas, where the paths of last October's annular and this coming April's total solar eclipses cross. So a lot of people are going there just to be in the same spot. This is what that path of the annular eclipse looked like, crossing the US, Central America, and South America. There were a lot of, went right over Albuquerque, for example. A lot of people were out west to see this. I happened to be in the Yucatan with a group of people. We were exploring all the Maya ruins. This is my group. We saw it. It was a beautiful day, and everyone was really happy after that. So here's the one coming up. Want you to notice that the path, the green line there, the green band, only really goes across North America. That's the only landfall. And again, you can see those everywhere on April 8th. It doesn't matter where you are in North America, except for parts of Alaska, you will see a partial solar eclipse, But if you're in that green band, you'll see a total solar eclipse. Now, I called attention to those blue lines, the 80, 60, 40, 20 and stuff. You will hear in the coming weeks and months, you'll hear people talk about how deep this eclipse is, how much of the sun is covered. Now, if I were to ask you, take a look at this picture, and I ask you, how much of the sun is covered? Well, there's two ways to define that. One, astronomers use the term magnitude to tell how much of the sun's diameter is covered. And then they use a word called obscuration to say how much of the area of the sun is covered. And believe it or not, half of the sun's diameter is covered, but only about 40% of its surface is. Whenever I give these numbers about how much of the sun is, I always use obscuration because that I think is a little bit more honest. So here are the paths of the eclipse that crossed the US in 2017 compared with 2024. We're going to take a little bit closer look at this path coming up in just 3 months now. It starts off over Mexico, goes right over Mazatlan, then crosses the border, goes skirts both San Antonio and Austin. Well, let's take a closer look here. You can see San Antonio and Austin, goes right over Dallas and Fort Worth, a little bit farther north, just misses St. Louis. St. Louis and Nashville were both in the path for 2017, but not this time. This time, Indianapolis and Cleveland and Buffalo are all on the path. Toronto just misses it. Montreal is just inside. And for where we are, the closest place to go would be extreme northern Vermont and New Hampshire. So what I'm showing you here, the red line is the middle of the path, and the two blue lines define the limit in between which you would see the sun totally eclipsed. So here are some partial, as I mentioned, everyone in the US, clear skies assumed, will see a partial eclipse that day. Here are some samples of different places around the country and what they'll see. Poor Quebec just misses it, just 99% of the way there, and still they don't get totality. Now that 99% is really important because the difference between totality and not seeing totality is incredible. Totality is really what you want, because here's all the things that can happen when you see the sun completely covered. First of all, I mentioned the sky gets dark, a kind of twilight everywhere. There are these phenomena along the edge of the sun called Bailey's beads. That's those little beads of light. The moon is not perfectly smooth, and so as the sun is disappearing behind the moon, the last little valleys, sunlight streams through them, and you get this little bead effect. The chromosphere is this brilliant crimson colored. It's the lowermost layer of the sun's atmosphere. It's called the chromosphere. And then you get these eruptions off the surface called prominences. And you also get, to the eye, just before and after the moon is completely covering the sun, you get that last little bit of sunlight peeking through, but you already have begun to see the corona, the atmosphere of the sun. And so you get this, what's called the diamond ring effect. Now, the corona is really what everyone's excited about. Who knew that the sun has an atmosphere? It does. It's very thin and it has its own light, but it's 1,000,000 times fainter than the rest of the sun. So if you block the sun completely, suddenly the corona comes into view. Now you notice it's not just a blob there. There are streamers and arcs and little bubbles and stuff. That's because the sun is magnetized, and the gases in this corona are roughly 2 million degrees Fahrenheit. And so they're extremely hot. They're in a plasma state. There's no more atoms. It's all electrons and protons and stuff. And they're controlled by this magnetic field. So they take on the shape of the magnetic field underneath it. Now I'm showing you a version of that same image that's been highly processed to show all of the magnetic field lines. This might remind you of those experiments you used to do when you were in grade school, where you had a sheet of paper with a magnet under it and you sprinkled iron filings to see all the magnetic field lines. Same basic thing is going on here. The corona is really a very exciting part. It turns out that the corona is not the same shape all the time. The sun goes through an 11-year cycle of activity. And when the sun is quiet, then the corona tends to be concentrated around its midsection, like there at left. But when the sun is at its maximum activity, which it is right about now, then the corona streamers tend to be pretty uniformly distributed all the way around. So that corona on the right is kind of what we're expecting come April. Now it gets dark, and so the brightest stars and planets become visible. This is what the sky will look like on April 8th during totality. If you should happen to be in the path, you'll certainly see Jupiter and Venus for sure. They're going to be very close to the sun. There's some other bright stars there that you see that might or might not be visible, but I'm figuring that most of these will be visible because this is a pretty long eclipse. The path is pretty wide. I expect it to get pretty dark that day. And because the path is so wide, all kinds of other things happen, like the temperature drops. And I mentioned birds and animals going to roost. They get very confused. And then finally, there's a phenomenon called shadow bands, which are more and more often seen. It's an interplay of that last little sliver of sun with the upper atmosphere and the interference patterns that develop from that. I was at an eclipse in Chile in 2019 with a group of people, and we were set up right in front of a big white geodesic dome. And this is just at the moment that totality is happening. I happened to turn around, and here's what was going on. You can see the stripes on that white, the horizontal stripes. Take a look at what it looked like in real time. And bang, totality has happened. Totality has started. So those are called shadow bands. Now, I've been describing all these effects. I'm going to let the voice of the people speak for itself. This was a total solar eclipse a few years ago that took place almost at sunset. It's a very dramatic event, and I'm going to let this play for a minute or so. Totality is approaching.
Whoa, Corona! Diamond ring! Whoa! Mercury!
Well, that kind of gives you a sense. And so for this path coming up in April, there's basically two places to be: in the path of totality and everywhere else. Because I have to say, I've asked people often when I do this in front of a crowd, I'll say, who has seen a total solar eclipse? And I see some tentative hands. Trust me, if you aren't sure, you have not. Because as you heard from all that screaming, it can be a life-changing experience. I can think of a lot of analogies, but imagine it's the 4th of July and, you know, a neighbor comes over and he hands you a little sparkler that you wave around for a couple of minutes versus being in the front row of the 4th of July concert on the Boston Esplanade. That's kind of like the difference. And so if you can make your way into the path of totality, I don't know how, trains, planes, automobiles, however you want to get there, come April 8th, if the sky is clear, it will definitely be worth it. Now, it turns out you wouldn't be the only people thinking of doing that. This is a sort of demographic chart showing what fraction of the United States is within a 10-hour drive of the path of totality, basically a day's drive. And it's a huge fraction of the US and the East Coast. If this could become one of the most widely observed total solar eclipses in history. And so why should you bother? Well, here's what's going to happen. In Boston, it's going to be a 92.5% partial eclipse. Heading north, Manchester, a little bit more. Lebanon, New Hampshire, 98.5. But it's not until you get to Burlington that you see totality. And all of those other things don't have the phenomenology, don't have the effects and the circumstances and the visual impressions that you see when you get to totality. So if it's clear that day, it's April 8th, it's a Monday, take the day off. If it's clear, Burlington's only about 3.5 hours away. If you're stuck here in Chelmsford, here is what you are going to see, or thereabouts near Chelmsford. We are going to see about a 98% eclipse here. And that the eclipse will last almost 2.5 hours, but the midpoint will be about 3:30 in the afternoon. So the sun will be a little bit past south. It'll be over high up in the southwest. It'll be, clear skies willing. We'll all have a really pretty dramatic view. So now, how about the weather? Well, it's early April, right? So turns out that statistically, the best places to go are toward the southwest end of the track. Mexico, southwest Texas. Once you get up here into New England, the prospects for clear skies are not that great, about 50% at best. You'll see a lot of these cloud charts that I'm showing you. But you know what? Climate is what we predict and weather is what you get. So you never quite know. Here's a series of satellite maps. You can see the red lines there marking the path of the eclipse for the last 6 or 7 years, okay? And you can maybe keep your eye there on northern Vermont and New Hampshire versus southern Texas. In 2017, everyone sort of wins out except New England. 2018, it's pretty bad everywhere except southern Texas. 2019, the same thing. You can see why I'm going to southern Texas for this eclipse. 2020, well, even Texas wasn't so great. Midwest might have been better. 2021, okay, and then it would have been very clear in Vermont. So that's a plus. 22, not so much. Texas is clear. And this past April 23rd, it would have been a fabulous day in upper New York and Vermont and New Hampshire. So we can only hope for clear skies. That's if you were asked me what should I do, you've sold me. I want to go see this eclipse. Well, if you're not going to go to northern Vermont, New Hampshire, I would buy a plane ticket to Dallas. Plenty of hotels. Dallas is in the path. You just need to step outside your hotel and look up and you'll see totality. And how you look at it makes all the difference in the world, because we want you to do this safely. When you're looking at a partial solar eclipse, it doesn't matter how much of it is covered or not, you are essentially still looking at the sun. And so you want to make sure that you have the right kind of protection for your eyes. We're talking about glasses or filters that have been approved and have been tested. There was a big problem in 2017. A lot of fake glasses were coming in from China that hadn't been passed or tested yet. And there are a lot of other things you will hear about. Definitely sunglasses are not nearly dark enough. All these other things, they are not dark enough to protect your eyes. They might block to your eye. It might seem like the sun is dimmed enough, but what you don't know is that a lot of the infrared radiation from the sun, the heat radiation from the sun, can pass through these materials, go through the lens of your eye, and literally cook your retina. And you don't want that to happen. Now, I will say, if you manage to get to where the sun is totally eclipsed, during totality, you can take the glasses off. So this is what most people get. They get these eyeglass things that go over your ears. If you have a pair or end up getting a pair, I want to make sure that they go in front of your eyeglasses, not behind them. But I have to say, I'm a big fan of these cards, and I've got one right here. It's a card, and it's got a lanyard on it, so I can just put this around my neck, and carry it around with me like that. And when I need to take a look, I carry it like that, and then I can just drop it, and it's always there. That's my preferred method. Whatever works for you. You can use welder's glasses. You can use all kinds of safe, legitimate methods, but just make sure you're protecting your eyes very well. Now, if you should happen to be using binoculars or a telescope, the danger is multiplied because they're actually gathering more light. They're like little magnifying lenses. This is what you do not want to do. You don't want to be pointing your binoculars at the sun and then having your glasses on. Instead, that protection, those filters need to be on the front end of whatever optics you have. These happen to be special purpose ones that are made from a thin film that is favored by photographers. I made these specifically for this pair of binoculars. But whatever you use, they have to be protecting. Okay, so you don't have the glasses, you're stuck. What can you do? Well, there are a couple of ways you can enjoy this eclipse even without looking at the sun, it turns out. One is what I call the waffle method, the cross fingers projection. As the eclipse is passing, you cross your fingers, you know, in the shape of a waffle like this, and let little beads of sunlight stream between them. And there'll be like a bunch of pinhole cameras that will project little crescents on the ground around you. Here's one I really like. Most of us own a pair of binoculars. And so this is a completely safe way to do it. Find a tripod, set up the tripod low to the ground, mount the binoculars on the tripod, however, use bungee cords or tape or whatever, and uncover one side and point it at the sun and let the sun stream through the binoculars. Now, don't look at the back end. Instead, project the sun onto a white card and you'll get a beautiful little image of the partially eclipsed sun on a white card. The closer the card is to the binoculars, the brighter the image. The farther away, the image gets bigger, but not as dark. And you can also do what I did here, which is to put a little cardboard shield around the binocular that makes for a nice dark shadow. This is great for group viewing, great for kids. They can see the eclipse, and you know, it's a sort of an indirect way that doesn't endanger them at all. All right, I know what you're saying, but I want to use my camera, Kelly. Okay, we're going to talk cameras a little bit here. Any camera will do something to record the eclipse. There are different kinds. You know, your smartphone camera, they're getting better all the time. Pointing it at the sun for brief periods of time will not hurt it. You won't get a very good image, I promise you, but because it just can't handle that bright a source. If you have an older style point and shoot camera, that will be great too. If you have a regular, you know, an older style camera with interchangeable lenses, you can take all kinds of great photos of the eclipse. Taking video is great. What I like to do is take my smartphone or a video camera, put it on a tripod, and just take a wide angle view of me and everybody else around me. That captures all the excitement, all the hooping and hollering, and somebody else will take a good picture that I can go and find elsewhere online or whatever. Just remember, especially if this is going to be your first eclipse, whether it be partial or total, don't obsess about taking images. Somebody else will take great images that you can have. Enjoy the experience yourself. So, okay. So the important thing to remember here is that all of these cameras ideally should have a filter in front of them for the partial phases of the eclipse. Now, if you're stuck here in the Chelmsford area, for example, the Middlesex area, you're all going to see a partial solar eclipse that day. No one here around here is going to see totality. So every time you look at the sun, you either need glasses, or if you're looking through your cell phone, you can even take your glasses and put in front of the lenses of the smartphone. Only during totality is it safe to not use the glasses at all and just let your eyes enjoy the sight. So if you've got a telescope, the telescope needs a filter too. You can buy these filters. One of the reasons I'm giving this talk now and not, 2 months from now is to give you time to sort of prepare. If you have a telescope, that's great. You should get a filter for it, which a lot of the telescope manufacturers have custom size filters for the tube that you have. They're pretty easily obtainable. They can be as little as like $10 or $20 for a polyester filter, all the way up to $80 to $100 for a glass filter like the one you see there on the left. But just make sure whatever filter you use that it's fitting over your telescope snugly. And if you've got a finder scope, make sure you cover that because you don't want sunlight ruining that as well. Now, if you're going to take pictures with a telephoto lens, and I suspect a lot of you still have older style cameras with telephoto lenses, be aware that the sun is really pretty tiny in the sky. Even with something like a 400 millimeter lens, that's for a full frame camera, The orange numbers are for what were called crop sensors, which a lot of cameras have, lower cost cameras that are not full frame. So if you had a 300 millimeter crop frame, that top middle one here, this is what your picture would show. Pretty decent, but you still need a pretty long focal length in order to see that. So there are lots of ways that you can take pictures well using these cameras, any of these cameras, and there are all kinds of ways that you can take them badly. For one thing, you want to disable the automatic focus. You know, these automatic focusers are used to seeing like tree limbs and stuff like that they can focus on. When you get something up in the sky, it has a much more difficult time figuring out what the focus is. So if you can, you want to focus manually and then put a piece of tape on the focusing ring so that it doesn't move. And you just vary your exposures to all, this is some samples. This is on the more technical side, but depending on the lens that you have and the sensitivity setting, the ISO setting that you have, you're going to use different kinds of exposures. Just take lots of different exposures. You'll have plenty of time. For most situations, you want to take really fast exposures, even with a filter in place, because the sun is still really bright. It's not obvious here, but the edge of the sun is darker than the center. So where we are going to be here in Chelmsford, we're going to see something like this here at lower right. And that's actually the darkest part of the sun's disk. So you're going to want to take a longer exposure there to capture that well. And then if you happen to be in totality, there's all these fun. I've talked about this before. These take generally longer exposures. Those are the lengths of time. The key here is a couple of things. Make sure that your camera is focused to the best you can, and then lock that focus in. Don't use autofocus. And then just take a whole bunch of different exposures at different exposures and all kinds of levels. One of them will come out great, I promise you. But you will get better results if you use some of these tips. First of all, use a tripod, focus manually, as I mentioned. If you've got a filter on the front end of your camera, usually it's called a UV filter, but it's really just for dust. Take that off because you'll get secondary reflections. If you've got a point and shoot camera, you want to cover the zoom lens, cover the flash on it so it doesn't go off during the middle of the eclipse. Now, all that talk I just said about the fancy cameras, this is exactly what most of you are going to do. I just know it. You're going to point your smartphone, you're going to put your eclipse glasses in front, and you're going to try to take a picture that way. And guess what? You can get a pretty good picture, but you won't get it doing what she's doing right there. There are some tips I'm going to give you right now. The first thing is to buy yourself a little clamp that can hold your camera steady on top of a tripod. You can see one there at left. That costs about, Amazon is full of these things. They're about $20. Doesn't include the tripod, but most of us have a tripod or have access to one. And here's my little secret. If you have a selfie stick, probably the stick part screws into the clamp part that holds your phone. If you unscrew those, that little screw hole there that you see indicated with the red arrow, that will fit a tripod. And so you can try that. Now, another thing you can do, I've seen a bunch of these. I have one myself. I used it to take this picture here. It's a little clamp-on telephoto lens that allows you to take, close-up images of anything, or the sun for that matter. So I did it just basics here. I got one of the, I have one of these lenses. I took these pictures yesterday. There was snow all over the ground, and I cobbled together a solar filter there. You see it in the front. I cut up one of those pairs of viewing glasses and I taped it to the front of the lens. And this was the result I got on the left through that lens. After a lot of careful focusing and diddling around, it's not retouched at all. It's exactly how the camera took it. And you can see, comparing it to the picture on the right, which was taken by a spacecraft of the sun, there are some sunspots on the sun that show up here. There's a couple of big ones here. There's a couple of smaller ones here that are up here. So this is a pretty decent image. But what I must say is, if you've got a newer model smartphone camera, the cameras in there are excellent. And they come in with a built-in telephoto often as well. So you might not need that clamp-on telephoto lens. You can just use the camera itself. One of the things, though, that the smartphones are not good at is letting you control taking the picture. So there are apps available that you can buy that override the camera's automated functions and let you control things like the zoom and the focus and so forth. Now, I want to tell you about one that's been specifically developed for solar eclipses. It's called Solar Snap. It's about $15, and it's a combination of a filter, which you see there on the left, and an app which controls a lot of the functions of your camera. So I tried out Solar Snap yesterday. I happen to have some wild turkeys in my backyard. That's an actual, in the middle there, it's an actual picture of a turkey not far from my office window. I get, again, a drink out of the bird bath. And you can see the controls there for zoom and exposure and focus. Those are all really good. They'll work on your camera even if you're not doing an eclipse. But during the eclipse, this app has other features like we'll take an automated sequence of images for you. It's a very good program. There are others out there. Solar Snap is one I have a familiarity with. So if you want, I'd encourage you to get that. No matter what, however, no matter how you're taking your pictures with your smartphone, you need one of these. It's a Bluetooth shutter control. Anytime you've ever, like me, taken a selfie and fumbled to find the button on the face of the phone to take the picture, this solves that problem. It's a little separate Bluetooth transmitter that syncs to your phone through Bluetooth and controls the camera function. And in your hand, you can hold this. And that way, when you're taking pictures of the eclipse, if your camera's on a tripod or whatever it happens to be, you can take pictures with your smartphone without ever touching it. It's a very good investment. And believe it or not, you can find these things for as little as $5. My last bit of advice for camera taking is that do not wait until the day of the eclipse to try all this out. For starters, especially if you're going to be stuck here in Chelmsford, well, stuck is a relative word. We're going to see a fantastic partial eclipse in Chelmsford and in the surrounding towns. You don't need to wait until eclipse day to practice taking photos of the sun, because the sun is going to be the sun whether it's partially covered by the moon or not. So you can practice with a filter, and remember that the sun is going to be pretty high in the sky. So you're going to be pointing the camera up high and you're going to be looking at the bottom of the screen. The other thing you can be doing right now, because the moon is in the evening sky, the moon and the sun are just about the same size as we've mentioned earlier on. And also the full moon is about the same brightness as the sun through one of the solar filters. So you can practice your exposures, you can practice focusing, all that stuff using the moon or the sun between now and the eclipse, and I guarantee it will improve your results. So these are some things not to forget. Make sure you have got plenty of memory and batteries and your filters, of course. But the one thing I want you to all remember to do, especially if this is your first eclipse, don't fuss about the cameras. Just make sure that you look up, watch what's going on, enjoy the view because it's special. There is not going to be another total solar eclipse in the continental United States, the contiguous US, until the year 2044. That's a long time to wait. And so you want to take advantage of this one while you can. Here are a couple of sites that I want to recommend to you to get more information than what you got here in this hour. Sky and Telescope magazine is owned by the American Astronomical Society, which is like the last word when it comes to all things astronomical. They have a terrific website portal, eclipse.aas.org, where you can find all kinds of information, how to order filters, how to set up your camera, how to view with a bunch of kids, what to expect and all that kind of stuff. Of course, Sky and Telescope, the magazine I worked for, also has a big science portal for the eclipse, and I encourage you to look at those. There are others as well, but those other sites, specialty sites, are linked from these two. So that's all I'm going to give you for now. And I want to close to talk about a couple of the eclipses that are coming up after this one. We have this saying in the eclipse chasing business that once you've seen a total eclipse for the first time, the first 4 words out of your mouth are, when's the next one? And so with that in mind, I'm going to show you some upcoming future attractions. There's an annular eclipse later this year in October. And, you know, you look at that track, it's the 2 red lines. It goes over the Patagonia region of South America. And boy, you know, there's not a lot of land. Again, this is a weather prospects map. So blue is good, red is bad. And right in the middle there, you see that little red circle? Yeah, that's Easter Island. Easter Island is in the path of this annular eclipse. And so, you know, a lot of people go to see solar eclipses because they happen in places that are, from a travel point of view, just exciting to be at. And Easter Island, I would submit, is certainly one of those cases. Then there's no total eclipses at all or annulars in 2025 next year. But in 26, it resumes again. There's a total solar eclipse that starts off in Iceland, where the weather prospects are really bad, even if there weren't volcanoes going off, and then crosses Spain, excuse me, and over the Western Mediterranean. And so I'll be taking a group here to a little town in Spain. We've rented this castle, and we're going to have a great time. We'll be seeing that eclipse just about at sunset. The one I really want to call your attention to is in August of 2027. You can see the track there, crosses northern Africa, goes down the western side of the Saudi Peninsula, and the weather prospects are generally quite good, about as close to a sure thing as you're ever going to see. You notice that it crosses Egypt, and in fact, the path of the eclipse crosses over Luxor, Egypt. And this will be an eclipse that features about 6.5 minutes of totality. It is the longest total solar eclipse for the rest of our lifetimes. And so if you've ever wanted to go to Egypt, here's a good excuse for doing so. A lot of people are planning to go there to see all the antiquities, go to Luxor, see, you know, cruise up and down the Nile, all of those things. The last 2 more I want to talk about. Here's an annular eclipse in about 4 years from now. And again, it crosses, you know, the Amazon rainforest, big deal, but it also goes over this place, which is the Galapagos. And so again, if you're looking for a reason to go to the Galapagos, January of 28 would be my suggestion for you. The last one I'm going to show you is coming up. It's more than 4 years away, but this is how far in advance I work on these things. It's going to cross Australia under very good weather conditions from the northwest corner where the Kimberleys, that's a fantastic geologic formation, through the outback, a place called Devil's Marbles, and then it goes right over Sydney. Now, this is July, but that's winter in the Southern Hemisphere. And my understanding is that Sydney gets pretty cloudy during winter. So you might want to, if you're going to Australia, you might pick one of these better spots. This past April, I went to Australia to do a little recon for this. And, you know, we saw the Kimberleys, the beautiful territory there. This is a place in the middle of the country called Devil's Marbles, fantastic geologic formations. And of course, Sydney, one of the world's great cities. In the process of this, I got stuck. Yes, literally stuck in the outback with my rental car and had to have a guy tow me out. I was miles away from anywhere, and I was lucky that he came along. It's my wife was with me at the time, and I guarantee you there was a lot of screaming and cursing going on in that car at that time, but now we kind of laugh about it. It's a good story to tell. In any case, if you're thinking about going to one of these other eclipses besides the one in 2024, it is not too early to start planning for that. Lots of places already have tours planned. In some cases, the tours are mostly full. And if you want to go on some tours, I could highly recommend the ones that I set up at Sky and Telescope. But you know, whatever works for you is good enough. I hope that you all have clear skies here on Eclipse Day, whether you're here or you've ventured someplace to get directly into the moon's shadow. It's going to be a fantastic event. And Gianna, I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm going to stop the share, and maybe we can take some questions. I see a bunch of them. I see like 40. Well, there's 40 comments in chat. Let's start with the Q&A maybe.
Sounds good. Let's see. What have we got? Lisa asks, where will you be in April?
I will be in Fredericksburg, Texas. we actually have 2 tours going. One's in Texas, the other's off the coast of Mazatlan. I will be with a group of 250 people, my new best friends. And so we're hoping for clear skies that day.
Great. Let's see. I do know a lot of people have said that they are going to Burlington, Vermont, so everybody have fun up there. But Diana says, my family is going to Burlington for the total solar eclipse. What should we do if the day of the eclipse comes and it's cloudy?
Right. So here's the thing, Diana. If it's going to be cloudy all over New England, right, then I would still go to Burlington because you might not see the sun, but it's still going to get dark. Right. The temperature will still drop. All of those, some of the things will happen. I believe me, I have been disappointed a few times. A couple of years ago, I went to Antarctica to see a total solar eclipse. We had only a 10% chance of it not being cloudy. And sure enough, it was cloudy that day, but boy, did it get dark. It was one of the darkest eclipses I've ever experienced. And you'll still be able to say that you experienced totality, even if you didn't get to see the sun.
Awesome. So this is a good question. Teresa asks, where do we purchase these approved eyeglasses or eyewear?
Right. So Teresa, I would go, if you can remember eclipse.aas.org, eclipse.aas.org, that there's a whole page there devoted to eclipse safety and list of all the manufacturers that are approved. And I can tell you the names of 2 of them. That if you can remember them, one is called, I'm not making this up, Rainbow Symphony. That's an outfit based in California. That's actually where Sky and Telescope gets its glasses, Rainbow Symphony. And the other one is based in the Midwest called American Paper Optics. Both of those are approved, but there are all kinds of them that you can get from and trust. You might actually check with your libraries. Johnny, I don't know if the Chelmsford Library has gone out and bought a whole bunch, but there's funding available for libraries to get bulk glasses.
So that, you know what, I was just thinking, I got this question, I want to say a month or 2 back, someone definitely preparing themselves. And we weren't sure at that time. I think there still hasn't been an answer yet. So I might pose that question to Jill, our head of programming, just to see if maybe we will. So we'll keep you all posted. Keep asking us.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic, Diana maybe had a follow-up. How long are the eclipse glasses safe to use? They will last really a long time, as long as they're not physically damaged, like cracked. You can tell really easily. You can take your whatever you're using and just kind of hold it up to the sun quickly. And if you see little streaming like holes where the sun is coming through, then you know it's not safe anymore and you should throw it out. They're really, here's the thing, buy them now. They're inexpensive now, right? They're maybe $1.50, $2 a piece if you go out and buy them. If you wait until the last day, I guarantee that they will be more expensive. I have a niece who lives in Portland, Oregon. I sent her a bunch of eclipse glasses in 2017. And the night before the eclipse, she had people banging on her door because they knew she had them, paying her $20 a piece for these glasses that I'd sent her. So don't wait. Please don't wait.
Wow. I have also written down these websites as a just in case too that you've recommended, just so that I can pass those over to Jill, just to include those with the recording too.
Right.
So we'll make sure that you folks get that info. Steve asks, can Solar Snap be used with one of the solar eyeglass filters?
I'm not sure what you mean, Steve. If you, so Solar Snap, when you buy it, you get a little packet, which includes filters to put over the front of your smartphone camera, and actually a couple of pair of the Eclipse glasses for you yourself. That's the physical part of it. And then in the packet is a QR code to download the app for your Android or iPhone that will take over the controls and do all those nifty things that I was talking about. So it's a package deal against about $15. Just look for Solar Snap. Again, there are others, and there are other apps that can control your phone's function too. The thing about Solar Snap is, like that kludgy thing I did with the solar filter that I cut up and put in front of the lens. That's not the best optical quality. What you will get with Solar Snap is a sort of better quality membrane filter that will give you sharper images than you otherwise might get.
All right. Let's see. Someone has asked, I have family in Toledo, Ohio, where they might be right on the edge of the solar eclipse path or just outside of it. Where can
Right.
I find out for certain?
Right. So the two websites I will lead you to other websites. There is one website called, I think, eclipse2024.org. And there you can drill down, and every conceivable community is listed there. The one thing you know, if you can't figure it out, go to that AAS website, eclipse.aas.org, and it will lead you to places where you can get customized specifications for your location, wherever you might be. I will tell you that if they're right on the edge, right, and they might be just outside of it, they better find some friends or make a restaurant reservation in the path, because close is not gonna, you'll be very disappointed.
All right. Let's see. Steve asks, how fast would you need to be traveling on the ground in order to keep up with the eclipse or stay in totality?
Great question, Steve. So the moon's shadow is moving across the Earth at roughly its orbital speed. And so it's supersonic, especially near the beginning and the end of the path. It is many hundreds of miles an hour. And in fact, there was a very celebrated case back in the 1970s where there was a total solar eclipse, and some scientists arranged to use one of the Concorde supersonic transports with special windows in the ceiling, and they traveled along the path of totality, and it lasted more than an hour for them. So if you happen to have access to a supersonic plane, go for it.
Sounds good. Let's see. Karen asks if, do you have any app suggestions that would help identify planets in the night sky?
Oh, I have a great one, Karen. It's called, I mean, there are many, many apps, and they're all pretty good. Some are more involved than others, and some are not particularly intuitive to use. This is one that at the school where I taught, the fifth graders use it. So if you consider yourself as smart as a fifth grader, this is the one to get. It's called Stellarium. The word stellar, S-T-E-L-L-A-R, then with I-U-M at the end. Stellarium. It's free. It's open source software. It works on your phone or on your desktop or your iPad, and it's a very, very good program. I use it all the time when I'm looking stuff up, and I can highly recommend it.
All right, let's see. What are the spheres behind you?
Yes. So one of the things that Gianna mentioned, that my specialization is space exploration and planetary science. When I was at Sky and Telescope, I knew everything about the planets. I followed all the NASA missions. I was a deep embed, if you will. And so a lot of those missions delivered enough information to make a globe of that particular planet. So there's only one globe of the Earth back there of all of them. It's the one on the far left, this one right here. And it's not just any ordinary globe of the Earth. It's a globe of Earth with all the eclipse paths plotted on it for the rest of this century. And the ones going left to right next to it are Mars, the moon, Venus is behind my head, celestial sphere, a topographic globe of the moon, topographic globe of Mars, and another celestial sphere. So that's sort of my geeky niche in the globe making manufacturing process.
Love it. Let's see. I think Steve has a clarifying question about Solar Snap, but is Solar Snap app, it's free by itself? Is it free by itself?
I don't know the answer to that, Steve. What I know is that when I got it, I had a QR code that allowed me to download it. I think we should all go running right out and look in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and type in Solar Snap and see what we get. I wouldn't be surprised if they were giving it away for free.
All right.
I'll have to get the answer for that. That's a great question. I don't know.
Let's see. Lisa says traffic jams. I sat in them for the Oregon total eclipse, but it was worth it. Thanks for sharing, Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa, was that your first one? Was that your first totality? If it was, I know you're itching to see another. I'm sure you are, and I hope you get to see it again this coming April. It's true. You know, especially for people who are not totally invested, it's a 3-hour long event, but totality only lasts a couple of minutes. And so what happens is these crowds of people would gradually build up over the course of the morning. Then totality happens, and once it was over, everybody wanted to get out of town, and like 6-8 hour traffic jams were not unheard of in like Wyoming and Oregon. It was crazy. Third one, she says, okay, well, I hope you get many, many more in the years ahead.
Let's see. I'm looking in the chat for some questions here. I know some folks, we've talked about the glasses and where you might find those. And like I said, I'll make sure we get those websites to you folks. Let's see. Lots of Burlington, Vermont folks. Here we go. Briss says Will Ferrell as Harry Carey does a sketch with Jeff Goldblum and stared into the sun. It was quite funny. Thank you for sharing. We'll all have to Google that later on today.
You know, it's really, that's funny. I've just put in chat the names of the 2 companies that sell the most glasses. In 2017, President Trump famously walked out to the edge of the White House with Melania and looked up at the partially eclipsed sun without any eclipse glasses on. That was a howl. There was a case of somebody in New York, in the New York area, who look, your eyes, just think about during your everyday lives, when you're in a situation where you suddenly find yourself looking at the sun, you turn away. Your reflex to not stare at the sun is great. But there are some people, and I don't know what they ate or drank or smoked to get to this state of mind, but you know, they will hold their eyes open while they're looking at the sun, thinking that they'll get some sort of greater enlightenment. And in those kinds of cases, you can actually permanently damage your retina. There's 1 or 2 cases. Sometimes it's only temporary, and in rare occasions it is permanent. And so I just wouldn't recommend it. We at Sky and Telescope obviously don't want you ever looking at the sun without optical protection. However, I will probably have to admit that we have all looked at a sunset and not gotten any eye damage from it. That's because the atmosphere is filtering out most of the sunlight. So there are exceptions, I suppose.
Gotcha. Let's see. DJ asks, what was the ISO standard that you mentioned that people should look out for?
Right. So on the inside of the so here's the pretty front side of this. On the back side is all the fine print so this material has actually been laboratory tested to be safe to block out. Literally, it blocks out all but 1 part in 100,000 of the sun's visible light, but it also blocks out ultraviolet and infrared as well. And that's what that testing standard is all about. If your glasses have that ISO certification, then they are sort of lab certified to be safe.
All right. Let's see. More questions here.
Oh, okay. So Dennis has a great question. When I showed those pictures of totality with these sort of filaments coming out, can you see actual movement? It's very slow, like in human scale, Dennis. There was a project in 2017 called Mega Eclipse, I think it was. And because the path of the eclipse was crossing the entire United States, and because it took like an hour and a half to do that, you could imagine that the corona and the streamers that you saw at the beginning of that would be somewhat different than the ones you saw at the end. And so they set up telescopes all along that path, and they did see some motion, small scale motion, but it's not like you're going to see them, like radiating out. This is matter that is being confined by the magnetic field of the sun, and it's not like it's really erupting off of the surface so much as being confined into these patterns that you see.
Just clarifying, how many times have you seen totality from Katie?
Okay, Katie, for total solar eclipses, I am 12 for 15. I've been to 15. I experienced all 15. I have missed seeing 3 of them, including the very first one that I tried to see in Hawaii. It was very disappointing. I missed one. I was in South Africa with a meteorologist with me, and the clouds rolled in off the Indian Ocean, and we couldn't outrun them. It was a very, very disappointing time, especially for all the people that are with me. I'll tell you the most exciting one I missed. I went to Kenya in 2012 to see a total eclipse of the sun that was to last 12 seconds. Only 12 seconds. And I went from Boston to Kenya to see this. And not only was it cloudy, there was a thunderstorm. Not only was there a thunderstorm, there was a sandstorm that was strong enough to knock over all of our tripods. But it still got dark, so it was fun.
Oh my gosh. And I do see, so Steve made a comment. I noticed differences in optical clarity between several different solar eyewear
Yes.
options during the October eclipse. Some looked fuzzy.
Right. So, Steve, that's very perceptive of you. The ones that look like this with the very dark polymer filters are generally of lower optical quality. If you see stuff that looks like aluminized mylar, even if it's a thin, it tends to be a very thin sheet, that's much higher quality. And in fact, in some sense, it's better quality than even the glass filters. So Steve, if you were looking, since you asked the question, maybe you're looking to get some, there is a company called Baader, B-A-A-D-E-R, Baader. It's a company in Germany that makes special films. It comes in sheets. You've got to make your own filters, but it's great if you want to make your own for like binoculars or a telescope or something like that. That is some of the best quality, optical quality for taking not only the best quality pictures, but if you were using them for like binoculars or a telescope that you're looking through, the same deal. Glass filters also tend to be quite high quality. And different filters render the sun in different colors. You know, they're filtering out most of the light. Some of them leave it a really bright orange-ish. Some of them are kind of a creamy yellow, kind of like you imagine the sun being. Some even make the sun look a little bit blue. I don't like those at all. So you have to kind of test around.
And I think this is our last question of the presentation, but Leslie asks, which other planets have solar eclipses?
Well, that's a great question. So what we need is a planet with a moon that's large enough and close enough to cast a shadow onto the surface of the planet. Mars has 2 small moons, but they're really kind of small. And so on Mars, you can only see partial eclipses or annulars. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune can all see total solar eclipses because they all have big moons. So, you know, Earth is not the only one, but I'm going to add one little fascinating detail here before we close. You know, the moon used to be much closer to the Earth than it is now. And even now, the moon is moving away from us at about 2 inches a year. And so eventually there will come a point in time, roughly 1 billion years from now, when the moon is too far away from the Earth to ever completely cover the sun again, and there will be no more total solar eclipses. Be a sad day for Earth. Not something we have to worry about, but it is in our future. It's in our future that someday we won't have total solar eclipses anymore.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Kelly, thank you so much.
Let me quickly ask Jones. Jones said, when will it start in Burlington? I'm not sure when it starts. The midpoint, Joan, will be just about what it is here in Boston, roughly 3:30 in the afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much. You heard that, everybody going to Burlington. So plan accordingly. Again, thank you so much, Kelly, for presenting for us tonight and giving us some great info to get us all prepped. And this has been recorded, so we'll send out an email to you folks with the recording as well as some helpful links that Kelly shared. So look for those sometime maybe tomorrow or early next week. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a great night.